Hey! Hey, a workbench! He could try out his new bling. It was a bit windy up here. People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Reynardo had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the ravens caw about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice. Reynardo thought of the Iblis stone and shivered. He had no business messing with ancient, cruel artifacts. What he needed was his friends around him. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. What was behind that door? Reynardo's nose told him there was treasure there. They must have forgotten it in a hurry. Surely they wouldn't mind if he helped himself to it. After all, he wouldn't even know. Ooh, sparkly, thought Reynardo. Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Where had the mad rabbit got to? blossom within him, or something. Definitely easier to fight inanimate objects. Dirty and bloody, Reynardo finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Reynardo recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am! The ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Reynardo had already let that armature slip away to save Lapino's life. But even its core, the eye torn from a god, surely they could fashion a great weapon from that. The core of the Sky Ripper? Lapino's excited. That's an actual thing that we could just go and get. You've been busy.
He sure had. Reynardo told him all the things he'd been up to. Soon they got to talking about old times, about wages they'd won and lost, and scrapes they'd barely got out of. It was good to be back with his friend. True, the core was capable of terrible, uncontrollable destruction. But this time, he was sure it would work great. It's beautiful here, thought Reynardo. He was thrilled to be back with his old war buddy. He'd missed the mad rabbit, but something was not quite right. Yeah! Reynardo hoped there weren't bats. Bats freaked him out.
All this ore. Reynardo could forge a really... There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Reynardo felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, a few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Reynardo smelled sick animals and dying ones. No healthy ones. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. Reynardo thought. Maybe Lapino was right. Maybe we should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. To hurt. Actually, it already did. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Reynardo felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god. How could he use it? He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Reynardo ached to get away from it. He brought the core back with him to the Farfarer. But honestly, Reynardo ached to be rid of it. Tell you what, said Lapino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost. The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Reynardo. But what if Lapino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Reynardo ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Lapino was a touchy rabbit. Reynardo knew that. You're brave, I know, Reynardo said. But this is what I was hired to do.
At least let me run ahead and warn the scientists you're coming.
So, Lapino was intent on being a hero, just like him. War made sensible men crazy for glory, and Lapino had never been sensible. But what was the harm? Lapino might well trip over a hornet's nest of ravens. But that was better than ravens lying in ambush, wasn't it?
They finished the trip to the Nexus in silence. Reynardo had no sooner rescued his friend than he was putting him back in danger. All right, he finally said as they landed. Go. As Reynardo watched Lapino vanish on the horizon, he could feel nausea building. He felt ill. Could his knees really be aching this much? But how could he have handed the core off to Lapino? That was a recipe for disaster. Reynardo wondered what would happen if he jumped. Would he be rescued by an emergency platform? When Reynardo went to the china shop, for some reason the owner was always nervous. He was sort of yanking his own chain, wasn't he?
Reynardo felt worse. All his joints were aching now. He'd been through beatings that felt better than this. So the core had a kind of poison that could harm you without even touching you. That's new. Well, it had power. The rebellion needed something with power. And how was this any worse than a sword wound? Well, a death by sword was sudden and fair. This was just squalid. A piecemeal death, like old age.
It would be fun to try out that one. And here was a handy workbench. Energy spheres. Easy to dodge, but boy do they sting if you didn't pay attention. back to him. He wondered what he'd remember next.
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists everywhere. Reynardo found the mad rabbit cowering under a desk. The ravens, they must have known we were coming, said Lupino. How did you... Well, see, I was doing a card trick with my lucky deck, and I kind of bobbled the cards, so I went under the desk to gather them up, and boom! I guess we'll have to take the car straight to the secret base. The secret rebel base. Yes. They had engineers there. But wait. Calaveras, the sage in the mountains. Maybe he would know what to do with the naked core. Ah, yes. The secret base. Not even Lupino knew where it was. They had engineers there. Those toads would surely know what to do with the core's power. And then he'd be free of it. But he couldn't take Lupino. The core would work its evil on him too. You stay here. Give me the coordinates. I'll meet you there. Someone needs to bury these scientists. Why do I get all the fun jobs?
And with that, Reynardo returned to the Farfarer and took off.
The ruins were quiet, but Reynardo could hear a buzzing in his ears. Was it bugs? Or was it the core slowly feeding him poison? The council would know what to do. If the core had this much power, it could surely change the terms of the great battle that was coming. And maybe they would take this burden from him. Maybe. Reynardo felt like he was ready to learn new things. Thank goodness he didn't have to go to school for that. One small step for a fox, he thought.
Well, they really needed to redecorate anyway. time, boys! Caught the lead, Raven. Reynardo had left the Pinot behind because the core was poisoned. The core was poisoned because he didn't have the armature. He didn't have the armature because he'd rescued Lupino. Ooh, Reynardo's head hurt. He hadn't noticed that path before. Firewalls only let you through if they think you're hot enough. Didn't smell any better dead than I'd have thought. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people. How had it come to this? Reynardo had signed on as an adventurer. Sure, the Emperor had gone mad. Sure, Reynardo had heard horrors from the ghosts of dead kittens and puppies sacrificed in his blasphemous rituals. But when he jumped in, he'd only been a little bored and slightly broke. And here he was, carrying a bucket of death across a broken landscape. Run. Because he hated to quit in the middle. That was his fatal flaw. He had to know how it all turned out. What else could you hook? Beat Reynardo at hot potato.
"Say goodnight, Gracie," said Reynardo, wondering who Gracie was.
The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. Should have died a pirate, he thought.
Not going spectacularly well, thought Reynardo.
These were really nice chests. He should take one home, he thought. He dropped the core at the entrance to the council chambers.
Get that thing out of here!
Croaked the speaker.
It's making us sick.
That's the core of the Sky Ripper, said Reynardo.
No, it's not useless at all, said an engineer toad. It's poisonous. Look at the fox. He's ill. Probably dying. Yeah, not useless at all, said Reynardo. So what do I do? Rub it on His Majesty? The engineer chuckled. Reynardo didn't like it when engineers chuckled. Oh, I got it. Listen, I can make a bomb and spread bits of the core all over a circle about 100 paces wide. Little chunks of poison and death. All you have to do is just get it near the Emperor. It'll kill him and his bodyguard and chop off the head of the fleet. Yeah, and if we're lucky, might poison some of the ravens around there as well. What about me? Right, what about you? Well, I'll build in a timer. You can set it and run. No, that's a horrible idea, said Reynardo. Oh, we have to do something, yes, said the speaker. This is something. Reynardo couldn't argue with that.
And so, reluctantly, Reynardo loaded the rigged core onto the Farfarer and set sail towards the Emperor's ship. The rebels took the fight to the Imperial fleet, but Reynardo was too sick to enjoy the view. He must have passed out as a firm hand grabbed him and shoved him forward. This was it.
The fleet seemed very big, and its ravens very tough. Or maybe he was just slower and weaker than before. He hated the idea of poisoning the enemy. It wasn't fair. Face to face with a raven, let the best swordsman survive. But they wouldn't even know what was killing them. Feather by feather, scale by scale. He didn't mind dying a hero. That sometimes went with being a hero. But he didn't feel at all like a hero. Not today.
Had that door been opened before?
He was exhausted. He was making stupid mistakes. His fur was coming off in bunches. Up ahead, he could see the Emperor's ship, long and sleek, a floating palace. The bomb would only poison a circle 100 paces wide. He would get as close as he could, set it, and run. Oh, this was a lousy way to win a rebellion, he thought. He didn't want a medal for this. He just wanted to be forgotten.
Reynardo wondered if he could learn to cook this way. Probably not. I don't have to clean up around here, he thought. These platforms were great. Reynardo wanted one for his house.
Reynardo twisted the timer on the bomb as far as it would go and staggered off. His knees hurt. Oh, everything hurt. He staggered away as far as he could until he had to lie down. He could see the entire Imperial fleet from here, and the rebel ships engaged with it. There was a blinding flash. And a second later, a monstrous thump. Burning rocks arced across the sky over both fleets. A wreath of fire shot outwards, rolling across the fleets. A pillar of smoke boiled up from where the Emperor's ship had been. It reached into the clouds. That's a wee bit more than 100 paces, thought Reynardo. It took Reynardo most of that evening to die. Some of the toughest ravens lasted all week. Some of the rebels in the furthest ships survived as much as a month. That winter, with neither Empire nor rebels to rule them, the islands slid into banditry. And so began the Second Age of Darkness. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future, when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, and he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the Path of Destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game-changer, but could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Reynardo wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Reynardo could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it.
As he set foot on the island, Reynardo could not help but feel a tinge of guilt. He'd left Lupino behind. He hoped the Mad Rabbit had somehow escaped the Ravens. He hoped they hadn't eaten him. If they had, he hoped they hadn't eaten him alive.
Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Reynardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it?
That ought to be enough for a proper sword, he thought.
Fire? Yes, please.
Didn't your mother tell you it's rude to stare? Snapped Reynardo, a little smug.
I wonder what happens if I go that way.
That had been his mistake before, thinking he could win a battle of wills with an ancient evil all by himself. He had to be cleverer than that, or braver, or something. The platform used a hybrid propulsion system fueled by anti-gravity and wishful thinking. There was blood on this one, so it hadn't saved its owner.
out your eyes.
Boy, if looks could kill.
You guys ever eat fresh food? You don't smell like it.
The new pathway made Reynardo curious. This one contained nothing but unmatched gloves. And something more useful. There it was. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask.